And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell. I just stop right there. The time would fail me to tell. I don't have enough time to even get into it. But telling of Gideon and Barak, Samson and Jephthah. Also of David and Samuel and the prophets. And so I love what the writer does. He brings all these amazing men to the table and he sees something. He's making note of something. All these men are conquerors. They conquered. Kingdoms fell before these men. Why? Because of faith. Through faith, they subdued kingdoms. Absolutely incredible. You know, you want to destroy the kingdoms that the enemy has built against you, all the strongholds he's built against you, whether it's pride, whether it's addiction, whether it's unforgiveness, bitterness, whether it's fear, we could go on. Whatever kingdoms you have around you, the way that they're going to come down is putting your faith and trust in the Lord. No other way. The writer, it's interesting, is really bringing two groups in his mind, two thoughts of people to the table. In other words, let me help you with this. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah. He groups these guys in one thought. And in a moment, you'll understand why. And then he goes on and says, also of David, Samuel, and the prophets. So he's got these judges, and then in essence, he groups David with the prophets, the king, which David was a prophet. And he kind of has these two groups. Now, the only reason that this is important is there's actually a structure here. Here we go again with the writer. He's borrowing a structure from somewhere. And when you see this and you understand this, then it really gives you deep insight where the writer is coming from. Right? And this is important, I think. And so what I want to do is I want to show you where the writer is getting this structure. And when they forgot the Lord their God, he sold them into the hand of Sisera, commander of the army of Hazor, into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they fought against them. Now, the backdrop here is Samuel is teaching Israel. And it's interesting, like the writer in Hebrews in chapter 11, going through this discourse, reminding his brethren of the greats and what God has done and the people he's used, Samuel's doing this right here. He's virtually doing the very thing that the writer of Hebrews in chapter 11 does. And so this is amazing. And so then he goes on and he says, then they cried out to the Lord and said, we have sinned, because we have forsaken the Lord and served Baals and Ashtoreths. But now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we will serve you. Okay, so here's what's going on. You have Israel forgetting God. Then them experiencing horrific trials and tribulation. All of a sudden, God jars their memory. Now I'm starting to remember who God is. They come back, they cry out, they humble themselves. And then there's going to be victory. This is the template. And so we go to verse 11. And the Lord sent Zerubbabel, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you dwelt in safety. Well, there it is. This is where the writer is drawing from. There's the structure that he's borrowing from. Look at the names. Zerubbabel, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel. You might say, well, Daniel, that doesn't look at all anything like what the writer of Hebrews laid out. He has Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah. At first glance, the only name I recognize is Jephthah. Most of you know that Zerubbabel is, in fact, Gideon. He's called both in Scripture, but this gets even better. The writer's not drawing from the Masoretic text. He's not drawing from the Hebrew Old Testament. He's drawing from the Septuagint, from the Greek version of the Testament. And this is what the Septuagint has, literally identical to what the writer of Hebrews laying out. Zerubbabel, Barak, Jephthah, and Samson. And so the first thing that I want you to understand is, yes, the writer's drawing from the Septuagint. Well, that's less important to me than for you to understand the backdrop and understanding Samuel's discourse and where Samuel was coming from. And what he wanted to do was remind Israel of God's great deliverance. And these are the men he brings to the table. This is exactly what the writer of Hebrews is doing right now. He is bringing these men to the table. Well, with that said, I want to move on to our next guy, who also bears a little bit of controversy in regard to him, and you'll understand this as we get deeper into it. But it's none other than Gideon. And I'm going to tell you, this like last week, this is a really powerful story. This is a story that I suspect is going to minister to you in many ways. And so I want to take you back to Judges. We're going to spend the rest of today looking at his story. In Judges chapter 6, verse 11, we'll get right to it. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which is in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. Now, one thing that, we're in verse 11, but if you go back, you start at verse 1, you start moving ahead, what you find is the Midianites totally were picking apart, shredding Israel. Anything of produce that they would do as they're trying to grow just to eat, the Midianites would come in and destroy it. We move to verse 12. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." And Gideon said to him, "Oh, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? You can't be serious." Gideon's like, "Are you kidding me? Look at the living conditions. It's a living hell. And you're telling us God is with us? How is that possible when all these things are taking place?" I want you to ask yourself a question. Can you relate to Gideon in any way as your life gets flipped upside down with some turmoil that comes in, with tragedy, with despair? These trials and tribulation, the fear is crippling. You're suffocating from anxiety. And some of you are actually having anxiety attacks. And this happens and you're looking out and you're saying the same thing as Gideon. You're like, you know what? I struggle, Daniel, to see the Lord in any of this. Listen to what Gideon goes on and says. This is an amazing statement. "Where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?'" That actually shows me the fathers were doing what they were commanded in Deuteronomy 6. They were commanded to declare the deeds of the Most High, the deeds that he did for them, the power. Do you know we're commanded to share the power of the living God with our children? We're to tell him of the glorious deeds. We should be training our children, telling them of all the things Yeshua did and his great power, making the blind to see, the deaf to hear, raising the dead, casting out demons. We're commanded to do this. And Gideon's saying, "I know these things because our fathers have followed this. They've told us one generation after the next." And I mean, we're probably roughly 300 years since Sinai. And so this is where he's at. Where are these things? But then he says this, "But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hand of the Midianites." So guess what? That's true. The Lord did forsake them. The Lord did give them into the hand of the Midianites. And all you need to do is go back to verse 1 and 2. It makes it very clear. It's exactly what happened. To Gideon, to this statement, the Lord responds and he says, "Then the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?'" What? Did you hear what I just said? All these things that I just said, and there's not even a break. There's nothing else. The Lord just comes back and says, "No, go in this might of yours. I'm going to save Israel through you. This is how I'm going to do it." So Gideon responds, and he said to him, "Oh, my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." You got the wrong guy. Trust me. I am the least of the least of the least. If there's any guy you would pick, it is not me. Sound eerily familiar to Moses? Going to verse 16, we continue. "And the Lord said to him, 'Surely I will be with you.'" I'm going to tell you something. You want strength when you need it most? You want to have real power to overcome those strongholds and all those kingdoms that have built themselves up against you? You're going to have to believe this. You're going to have faith that he will be with you. that he will neither leave you nor forsake you. You have to believe what Paul says to the Romans. If God is for us, who can be against us? You don't believe this, you're already defeated. That being said, I want to ask a question. Because if you notice, something radically changed here. I mean, you can go back to verse 1, go back to verse 2, and you can go back to even a few more verses. And what you see is the Lord did abandon them. The Lord forsook them. He gave them into the hand of the enemy. And it says particular time, 7 years. He did this. But now he comes on the scene in verse 16 and says, I will be with you. What happened? Something happened here between the beginning of the chapter and where we're at right now. And I didn't put this up here. All you need to do is go back to verse 7. And the very thing that we read in 1 Samuel 12, showing us this template of restoration and deliverance, happens in verse 7. They cried out to the Lord. Now that is significant because we know the prophets in Joel 2:32. Whoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. It doesn't say maybe, he might be. You'll give God a chance to think it over. Whoever calls upon, and Paul uses this verse in regard to Yeshua, whoever calls upon the name of Yeshua will be saved. That is a fact. It is a biblical fact when you turn to him. And my favorite, probably my favorite psalm, Psalm 50, verse 15. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. That's power. That's hope. That's salvation. That's deliverance. This is what God wants. He wants us to call upon him for help. And this is what Israel has done.
Hey there, this is Mike at Corner Fringe Ministries. Thanks for watching our video. If you liked the video or it encouraged you, do us a favor. Hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the share. And if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button. Now, if you want to watch the rest of this video, hit the button here. And if you want to watch the rest of this series, you can check it out here. And don't forget, you can download the Corner Fringe Ministries app today on any of your Play stores. Thanks for joining us at Corner Fringe Ministries.